Welcome to another deep dive, everybody. Today, we're going on an adventure with Tintin, specifically his iconic album, The Blue Lotus.
Oh, yeah. The Blue Lotus is fantastic.
So, most people know Tintin for, his crazy adventures around the globe, right? But this album's kind of different.
Yeah, it's a real turning point for Hergé, both as like an artist and a storyteller.
Absolutely. And we've got some great analysis and summaries to help us understand, why it's so special.
Yeah, should be fun. I'm really excited to dig into this one.
Me too. So, to get started, The Blue Lotus was published in 1934-35, a time of major upheaval globally, especially in China. What was happening historically that might have influenced the story?
Right, so you have to remember that China in the 1930s was dealing with all this internal conflict. Plus, there was growing pressure from foreign powers,
Yeah.
like the Japanese invasion of Manchuria in 1931. That created a very tense situation. So yeah, tensions were high.
Gotcha. So it's like Hergé wasn't just writing a fictional adventure. He was weaving it into a very real historical context.
Exactly. And the remarkable thing is he doesn't shy away from those complexities at all.
Yeah.
The Blue Lotus tackles colonialism and imperialism head on, especially how foreign powers were exploiting China, for their own benefit.
Wow. That's pretty bold for a comic book, especially one that's aimed at a younger audience.
Mm.
So, was he subtle about it, or was it more in your face?
He was surprisingly direct, actually.
Really?
Yeah. One of the clearest examples is how he portrays the opium trade.
Right.
He could have just used it as a simple plot device, right?
Yeah.
Just a way to create tension.
Sure, yeah.
But Hergé goes deeper than that. He shows how powerful countries use the opium trade to control and profit from China and its people.
It's like he's exposing this really dark chapter of history and forcing readers to confront, the realities of exploitation.
Yeah, precisely.
Yeah.
And he doesn't let Western powers off the hook either.
Yeah.
He critiques the whole system of international concessions, where foreign nations had these areas within China where they basically operated outside of Chinese law.
And that, totally undermined China's sovereignty.
Exactly. So yeah, Hergé is definitely making a statement with The Blue Lotus. It's not just entertainment.
Totally. But before we go too deep into, the analysis, can we get a quick overview of the plot, just the highlights so we know what we're dealing with?
Absolutely. So Tintin gets this mysterious invitation to travel to China right. He arrives in Shanghai, which is just buzzing with excitement and danger, and he quickly gets caught up in this web of intrigue involving an opium smuggling ring.
Oh, wow.
And it's run by this shadowy organization called the Black Dragon Syndicate.
Classic Tintin, always in the right place at the wrong time.
Exactly. But the people Tintin meets along the way make the story so interesting. He befriends Wang Chenye and his son Didi, and they join his fight for justice.
It sounds like more than just a sidekick situation, though. There's got to be a deeper meaning there, right? About cross-cultural understanding and breaking down stereotypes.
You're exactly right. Don't forget, this was a time when the West had a very limited view of China, often distorted. And by showing this genuine friendship between a European and a Chinese character, Hergé was challenging those ideas and showing the connection and mutual respect was possible.
It's amazing how much he packs into this story. But before we dive deeper into the themes, I want to go back to something you mentioned before, Hergé's personal growth. You said that The Blue Lotus shows a real turning point for him as an artist. What caused that shift?
It's a great story. While he was working on The Blue Lotus, Hergé met this young Chinese artist named Zhang Chongren.
Okay.
And their friendship totally changed Hergé's outlook. It opened his eyes to the richness and complexity of Chinese culture.
So instead of relying on stereotypes, he had a real-life guide to help him portray China authentically and respectfully.
Exactly. And that commitment to accuracy really shines through in The Blue Lotus. Everything from the details of Chinese architecture and traditions to how he depicts Chinese characters is so thoughtfully done.
Wow. I can see why this was such a turning point for him. It's like The Blue Lotus became this springboard for him to explore more mature themes in his storytelling.
Exactly. And that's what makes this album so important. It's not just a great Tintin adventure. It really shows the power of personal growth and the importance of challenging your own assumptions about the world.
Such a good point. So we've got this historical context of China in turmoil, a thrilling plot involving opium smugglers and secret societies, and this groundbreaking friendship between Tintin and Wang. Now I'm dying to know more about the themes Hergé explores. It feels like there's so much to unpack.
Oh, absolutely. We've just scratched the surface. The Blue Lotus touches on everything from colonialism and imperialism to justice, loyalty, and finding common ground across cultures. And then there's the symbolism, but maybe we should save that for next time. What do you think? It deserves its own deep dive.
I agree. There's definitely a lot more to uncover. Welcome back to the deep dive.
So before the break, we were starting to uncover some of the really complex themes in the Blue Lotus. And one that really stands out to me is this idea of cross-cultural understanding,
Mhm.
Like we see in Tintin's friendship with Wang Chenya. How groundbreaking was that for the time?
It was incredibly progressive, especially for like the 1930s. I mean, back then, Western views of Eastern cultures were often like full of stereotypes and this kind of exoticism, you know?
Right?
So by depicting a genuine friendship between Tintin and Wang Hergé was making a really powerful statement.
Absolutely. He was directly challenging those prejudices and showing that a real connection could exist across cultures.
Exactly. And it wasn't just like surface level either. The whole story has this deep respect for Chinese culture woven throughout it.
Yeah, it's not just about getting the details right. It feels like Hergé was trying to capture the essence of China. You got it. Look at how he uses elements of Chinese art and philosophy in the story.
Hmm.
He even uses visual techniques inspired by traditional Chinese painting to give it that authentic feel.
Yeah, it's like he's inviting the reader to step into a different world and see things from a totally new perspective.
Exactly. And for me, that's one of the biggest things the Blue Lotus is about. It encourages us to question our assumptions and embrace diversity and, try to find common ground instead of focusing on what divides us.
And that message feels more relevant than ever today in a world that's so interconnected but often struggles with these cultural misunderstandings.
Absolutely. The Blue Lotus is this reminder that we can learn from each other and build bridges no matter our differences, but it also acknowledges the darker side of those interactions.
And especially colonialism, right? We were talking about how Hergé criticizes how foreign powers exploited China, but isn't there like a potential contradiction there? Because Tintin is European right, and he's inserting himself into this conflict. So couldn't he be seen as like a symbol of Western intervention, even if his intentions are good?
That's a great question, and one that's been debated by Tintin fans forever. And yeah, it's true. Tintin does sometimes fit the mold of the white savior trope.
But it feels like Hergé was aware of that and was trying to like subvert it.
Yeah, I think so too. Remember, Tintin consistently sides with the oppressed. He challenges authority and he calls out corruption even within his own culture. He's not afraid to point out the hypocrisy of Western powers.
And his relationship with Wang feels like a true partnership, not like a paternalistic one. They learn from each other and they fight side by side for justice.
Absolutely. And that's where the theme of justice becomes super central to the story. Tintin isn't just solving a mystery or going on an adventure. He's actively fighting for what's right, even when it's dangerous.
He's like a champion for the underdog, a voice for those who are often ignored. And that resonates with people across generations, doesn't it? We love stories about heroes who stand up for what they believe in, especially when things are stacked against them.
Totally. And it's not even just about these huge acts of heroism. The Blue Lotus reminds us that we all have a part to play in fighting injustice, no matter how small. It's about speaking up against what's wrong, challenging prejudice, and amplifying the voices of those who are marginalized.
So even though it's set in the 1930s, those themes are still so relevant today.
Totally agree. But there's another layer we got to explore, the symbolism in the Blue Lotus.
Okay, let's do it. I've always been curious about the title itself. What does the blue lotus flower actually symbolize?
Oh, the Blue Lotus is loaded with meaning, especially in Eastern cultures. It represents purity, resilience, and the potential for spiritual enlightenment.
Wow, so it's more than just a flower. It's like a symbol of hope and overcoming adversity, which connects perfectly with the story's message.
Exactly. Even with all the darkness and corruption Tintin faces, there's still this underlying message of hope, this belief in positive change.
I love that. What about the opium? It plays such a big part in the plot, but it feels like it symbolizes more than just a drug.
Oh, definitely. On a symbolic level, opium represents moral decay, that insidious kind of corruption and the damaging effects of unchecked power.
Yeah. It's like a visual representation of the forces that threaten to destroy society from within.
Exactly. And then you've got the Black Dragon organization. They're not just bad guys. They symbolize those hidden forces of evil that lurk beneath the surface of society.
Yeah, they represent organized crime, greed, and the abuse of power.
And their defeat, in a way, symbolizes the triumph of good over evil, the resilience of the human spirit, in the face of adversity.
It's incredible how much depth there is to this story. We've covered so much ground, the historical context, themes, the symbolism, but what about the impact of the Blue Lotus? Did it change how people saw comics? Did it influence Hergé's later work?
Great questions. The Blue Lotus was a turning point, not just for Hergé, but for comics in general. And that's what we'll be diving into next. So stay tuned as we explore the legacy of the Blue Lotus and why it still resonates with readers almost a century later.
Welcome back to the show. So we've explored a lot about the Blue Lotus, the historical context, the themes, all the symbolism. But I'm really curious, how did this album change things for Hergé and for comics in general?
Yeah. The Blue Lotus wasn't just another adventure for Tintin. It was a huge turning point for Hergé as a creator, I think. He realized that comics could be more than just fun. They could be a way to talk about important social issues, to challenge stereotypes, to promote cross-cultural understanding.
So it was a turning point for him, artistically. Did this new awareness, affect his later work?
Oh, totally. After the Blue Lotus, you see a real shift in Hergé's storytelling. His adventures become more mature, more politically aware. He starts dealing with these complex global issues, but he still keeps that classic Tintin charm, you know.
It's like he found his voice. He figured out how to use this medium to really engage with the world.
Exactly. And he didn't shy away from tough topics either. In his later albums, he tackles things like arms trafficking, Cold War espionage, even the complexities of post-colonial Africa. And he makes it all exciting and engaging for readers of all ages.
So he took what he learned from the Blue Lotus and just ran with it. He pushed the boundaries of what comics could be. How was the Blue Lotus received back then, though? Was it seen as groundbreaking?
Well, it was definitely ahead of its time, especially in how it portrays Eastern culture. Back then, Western media was full of stereotypes about non-European cultures.
And Hergé, with Zhang Chongren's help, really worked hard to make sure his depiction of China was accurate and respectful.
He did. And that commitment to authenticity really made a difference. The Blue Lotus challenged those stereotypes and showed a more nuanced, more human view of China and its people.
It's amazing to think that a comic could have that kind of cultural impact.
It really is. And that impact is still felt today. The Blue Lotus is celebrated for how it handles cultural representation, and it's inspired so many comic creators to be more thoughtful and responsible in their own work.
Okay, so we've talked about its influence on Hergé and its cultural importance, but is the Blue Lotus still relevant today? Why should people still read it now?
Well, it's totally relevant, maybe even more relevant now than ever. The themes it explores, colonialism, imperialism, the fight for justice, cross-cultural understanding, those are all things we're still dealing with today.
And that core message of hope, of resilience in the face of adversity, that's so important in a world with so many challenges.
Absolutely. The Blue Lotus reminds us that even when things are tough, there's always a chance for positive change, and that we all have a part to play in making the world a better place.
It's like that image of the blue lotus flower, growing out of the mud, a symbol of purity and hope.
Exactly. That's why the Blue Lotus is such a powerful and enduring work. It's a timeless adventure, a call to action, and a reminder that stories can change the world.
What a fantastic deep dive. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling really inspired.
Me too. And I hope everyone listening is excited to revisit the Blue Lotus with fresh eyes. You might be surprised at how much this classic adventure still has to teach us.
Maybe it'll even spark a conversation, a new perspective, or even just a small act of kindness that makes the world a little bit brighter. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.